the year that we were trying to do the core values, we had read this book called Fish! Exclamation. It was about these fishmongers in Seattle who loved their work in spite of the fact that it was cold and it was stinky and it was, it was these slimy fish and it was like an objectively not very good job, but they were having a blast doing it. We had this rubber chicken, and if somebody did something stupid at a customer, or they made a technical mistake, or they whatever, then the rubber chicken would go hang on their cubicle. So the next time they showed back up in the office, they had the rubber chicken. People were afraid to make mistakes. They were afraid to be embarrassed. Not just the rubber chicken, but just in generally, because we would make fun of each other. It was a part of the culture was to laugh. Respect has to be here, and humor has to be there. Like, you can't have a laugh
at somebody's expense.
Exactly. That's going to hold your culture back.
Welcome to Sales and Cigars, the podcast for entrepreneurs where the only smoke we blow is cigar smoke. I'm your host, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development. I'm excited about today's episode with Mike Chaput from nSight. This is the continuation, or the second episode that he and I recorded about core values and culture. If you missed that first episode, go back and catch it, because this episode builds on that one. The core topic, again, is how to structure values so you know they're clear and lived by everyone in the organization. The whole team understands it, the whole team gets it, lives it, and it's memorable. The third episode is about operationalizing the values into your business, guiding business decisions, retention of your employees, and helping you build the growth. Here's the thing. You want to stay tuned for that, how to get that episode. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, and strap in for another educational episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. That's a great segue or great setup for looking at our core values and making sure that, well, do the core values represent the CEO? Do they represent the vision of the company? Are those separate? Somebody that has a set of core values, how do they start to think about that? And is it mine? Is it the company? Is it my vision?
Yeah, so I have some super strong opinions. You and I had a preparatory conversation about this, and so I'll take you all the way back. So I first read about core values in like the early 2000s, like shortly after I became a CEO. One of the business leaders that I quickly got onto was Jim Collins, and Jim Collins and Jerry Porras wrote this book called Built to Last. And that was the first time they analyzed these companies who they picked them from the market based on really long-term, better than average, portfolio stock returns. And what they found was that these companies all had these core values. And so now everybody in the world knows about core values. You can't do EOS or one-page business plan without setting core values. And people are still running on kind of some of the research that Collins and Porras did about what core values are, what they should be. And while I'm a huge fan of core values, I'll just say externalizing your values, your behavioral norms. You need to externalize them. And so I'm a big fan of it. I did some things wrong along the way that might be useful to your audience to hear about, because maybe they'll see themselves in some of the things that I did wrong along the way. So just to take you back, my three business partners, the founders of nSight, wanted to do core values, but we had a really, really hard time figuring them out. Now, at that time, we were running the one-page business plan by Vern Harnish and his book Rockefeller Habits. I'm out here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was part of EO San Francisco, and Vern came and talked, and he gave me a signed copy of his book, and I read it, and there was an implementation guide, and I even remember the tool. The tool was something called the life raft exercise. I don't endorse this, but I'm going to tell people about it so that they understand what we did and how we came up with some of the ideas. The life raft exercise was something like brainstorm your top performers, past and present, brainstorm their attributes, and then see if you can find some patterns in their attributes and circle those attributes, and then use those as the basis to determine your core values. And at the time, this wasn't part of Vern's instructions, but at the time we were reading lots of books. And I remember the year that we were trying to do the core values, we had read this book called Fish! Exclamation. It was about these fishmongers in Seattle who loved their work in spite of the fact that it was cold and it was stinky and it was, it was these slimy fish, and it was a like an objectively not very good job, but they were having a blast doing it. And one of their values was choose your attitude and have a sense of humor or something like that. We liked this, and we noticed that one of the core attributes of nSight employee, or the nSight high performers, was that they had a great sense of humor, including the 4 founders. And so we came up with this core value that was have a sense of humor and take enjoyment from the day. Now, your listeners hear that and they probably think to themselves, just like we did. We had that, by the way, I want to say for like 8, 9, 10 years, that was the core value. I mean, it was a long time it ran. And you're thinking that, even now, as I say it, it sounds super harmless. Like it sounds actually like a good culture, like a place I might even want to work. People who enjoy their day and who have a sense of humor. And so but encoded in that was a seed of what was holding our company back. And I'm going to illustrate what it was to your audience, and maybe it'll resonate with them. So one of the things that emerged out of this take enjoyment from the day and have a sense of humor was a rubber chicken, which sounds harmless enough. But we had this rubber chicken, and if somebody did something stupid at a customer, or they made a technical mistake, or they whatever, then the rubber chicken would go hang on their cubicle. So the next time they showed back up in the office, they had the rubber chicken. And again, it sounds like we're just trying to have a good time and not take things too seriously. But it wasn't. I want to say it was in 2009 or 2010 when I was in business school. I did operations class with a lady named Sarah Beckman at UC Berkeley, and she turned me on to the school of lean. So this is and there's a thought leader, a guy named Edwards Deming, who came up with his very famous 14 points of management, and the 7th point was something like drive fear out of the workplace. And the first time I read it didn't make that much sense. But then I started reading, James Womack and a whole bunch of other lean thinking, the Toyota Way to Service Leadership, like all these lean books. And all of a sudden I started to see what was happening in our culture and what was holding us back. And it was something like people were afraid to make mistakes. They were afraid to be embarrassed. Not just the rubber chicken, but just in generally, because we would make fun of each other. It was part of the culture was to laugh. And so sometimes we would laugh by making fun of each other. And, we were trying to, let's say, not take each other too seriously, but what it created was this undercurrent of trying to not get caught making a mistake. And what lean principles teach us is that in order for managers to make great, high quality business systems, you need to be able to see the error. There's a huge point where, they had workers pull the andon cord and stop the production line, which was an absolute no-no. And everywhere else in manufacturing was to stop the production line, but they weren't afraid to do it because they had no fear of retribution that they were going to get blamed.
There's no rubber chicken.
There was no rubber chicken. There was no, people just came out and was like, what's happening? They assumed it was a process problem always before it was a people problem. There was, and their core value was respect, not sense of humor. And then I was like, oh, it's okay to have a sense of humor, but it's got to be in its proper place. Respect has to be here and humor has to be there. Like you can't have a laugh
at somebody's expense.
Exactly. That's going to hold your culture back. And so now with this understanding that this all happened to me, there was something else I had to get over. So Jim Collins, because his research going all the way back to the godfather of core values, he had made a claim that core values should last the lifetime of a leader. And what do I know, right? Like I'm not Jim Collins. I'm not a Stanford PhD. I didn't research. I didn't write 6 best-selling business books. So, he said it. So I just assumed like once you set the core values, they have to remain for the lifetime of the leader. And by the way, I kind of wanted to believe that because they were a real hassle to make. There's four of us, they were like beating each other up. Like it was impossible to do it. I want to say it took us years to align on them. And we finally had alignment on it. We told everybody you had all these like biases, this escalation. Nobody wanted to come back and like, we've been pounding the wall on these values, really trying to get everybody to buy them in. And all of a sudden we're going to go back and we're going to tell them it's a new value and like whipsaw everybody and like go back and negotiate with leadership. Like I wanted no part of trying to reorganize the values. But I also knew that these values weren't going to get us where we needed to go. And it was that certainty that I was like, okay, core values, and I'll just, core values, or you just think of it as the culture is a bigger thing, and core values are a kind of a distillation of your culture. They're a way of communicating what the culture is. So core values or culture is an instrument to execute strategy at its core. And if your strategy is to be the highest quality MSP in the world, which is what our strategy was, we just wanted to be ultra high quality. To take your operating engine, which is your culture, off the table as something that you can pivot is like running a marathon with handcuffs or something like that. It's like you could still do it, but you make it 100 times harder and you're not really going to win with somebody who doesn't have handcuffs. The advice I really hope to communicate to your viewership is your core values probably you didn't get them right the first time. You didn't get them perfect the first time you did them. There's probably a lot of room for improvement, and there's no shame whatsoever in pivoting your culture. It's just like pivoting your strategy. You need to work those two things together. Little pivots to your strategy, little pivots to your culture, little pivots to your strategy until they get aligned. And it was always there, by the way, in the Jim Collins data. So here's what I mean by it was always there. If you go back and you reread that book, you remember that one of the companies that was there was Philip Morris, a big tobacco company, which I always thought was funny, right? Because they're not idealistic at all. At least the way I'm idealistic. Their idealism was some kind of hedonic, life is meant to be lived, a short life well lived is better than a long life. Like they had a bunch of justifications for selling cancer to people, but so they were idealistic in this weird way I don't align with. But their core values were some kind of hedonistic values that aligned with their business strategy. So this is the key point, right? All the values of the companies that were built to last, their values weren't random. Like Collins was big. He was surprised. He was like, we thought that they would all have, some of the same values. Like they would all, like, we thought it would be like innovation would be like a core value or integrity would be a core value to all of them. And he's like, what we found was they were all over the place and we didn't figure out the pattern. Well, the pattern he missed was they were all aligned with their strategy.
Like which is it's a huge miss if you really think about it.
It's a huge miss. Like if you could take Philip Morris's core values and overlay them onto a hospital, or vice versa. Like if you took the core values of a hospital and gave them to Philip Morris would fail. Like everybody would revolt, and they would have failed as a company. And so your core values have to be aligned with your business strategy. And the degree that they're not, like mine. To be the highest quality IT managed services provider on the planet, we needed to drive fear out of the workplace, like Edwards Deming figured out back in the 40s. And we weren't going to do that where people were scared of being embarrassed at work with something as mundane as a rubber chicken. Respect had to be part of our core value stack. It had to be one of the highest elements of our value stack. Now, I want to just point out here for a second to address the first question you asked me. Should they be a derivative of the leader? My answer to that is absolutely not. I am prone to be provoked and disrespectful, just like every other human being. Like I didn't live my life as the model of respect. Like that's not how I live my life. I would hate it if somebody had a camera of me at the airport the one time when I showed up and the plane was still on the ground, but they gave away my seat to somebody and I probably lost my mind. It's like, you'd be like, this is the leader who has the core value of respect. Like, well, the reality is I had to change to accommodate the business strategy and the culture that our company needed. I had to model submission to the behavioral norms
just like everybody else.
Just like everybody else. It's not about making it easier for me to be me. It's about making it easier for the team to win. And that means adaptation from everybody in your company, but most importantly, it means adaptation from you. It's in fact, in some real sense, it's better if it doesn't quite fully fit your personality, because then you can model adaptation. When I show up to meetings, there's no way I'm going to disrespect somebody. There's not a chance you're going to catch me doing that, because one of our core values is respect and connect. And so it holds me accountable. And the truth is, I really don't want to be disrespectful. When I act disrespectful, it's more of a provocation. It's more like the worst parts of myself. So
it's a reaction to a situation that we kind of temporarily lose our shit for a minute, and then we got to recognize it. But that's not our goal, right? But we got to think about it as a leader.
Absolutely. And so a couple things that there are to take away. One is your values need to be the behavioral norms that are going to make your strategy come alive. If they're going to be that, they can't be what's just natural to the leader. Like, what's natural to leader can not possibly cover all the behavioral norms that's going to be great for you to execute your strategy. That would just be an incredible surprise, right? Like that, or coincidence. But they shouldn't be that. They should be strategically hand chosen such that if people behave that way, then your strategy will manifest. And then you as a leader adapt to it. And the second piece is you need to be able to pivot and explore the domain of culture and the domain of strategy simultaneously until the two come together in some kind of harmony. It's like, it's like a singing voice. Like if one's pitch is off and the other pitch is here, and it's like, but you tune them up and you kind of get them, and all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, now those two things sound great. The strategy, and an example would be like, the Ritz-Carlton. I was actually, believe it or not, I was at Tahoe last week, and I went to the Ritz-Carlton at North Star for dinner. And they have a slogan called "Ladies and Gentlemen Serving Ladies and Gentlemen," and that kind of embodies the Ritz-Carlton ethos. And that core value ethos wouldn't work for Comcast or PG&E.
No, it wouldn't.
You really have to have the right cultural ethos for the right strategic elements, and so you need to be able to play with those two things simultaneously. You can't pivot one without the other, and you can't pivot the other without the one, and you need to do them together.
And it's okay to go back and rethink these, and you can't make wholesale changes just because, like, oh shit, we got to fix this whole thing. You made this little, for people listening, kind of ratcheting your hands left and right, up the scale to get your core values to align with your strategy, or your strategy to align with your core values, depending upon where you're deficient. But it's a constant thing. You're not Moses coming down the mountain with the tablets, right? Those things can be evaluated, and they need to be evaluated. But at one point you get them, and unless your strategy changes for some significant reason, your core values, once they're aligned, and everybody has to align to those, both the strategy and the core values. And if they're not a fit, then we need to make a decision about that particular individual.
Okay, so there's a couple other elements to core values I think are important if you're interested.
Sure.
One of the big things that people get wrong, I see it all the time with core values. It's so simple, but I ask people, because I love core values, I love culture, and so if I get into conversations with people, I ask them, and they're like, and they struggle to kind of remember what they are, and they get them kind of, but not exact, and I'm just like, you're the CEO, man. Like, if you don't know these things exact, then nobody else knows them at all. Like, it's really, really, really basic, but like, they've got to be easy to remember. They have to be easy to remember. Now, the problem with being easy to remember is that they're not going to be clear. They're not going to be compelling. They're not going to be rich and deep. So you got these competing forces that you have as it relates to externalizing your culture, but there's a solution to it, and it's not that complicated. So at nSight, the first element of the core values are 4 letters. Okay, RSVP. Everybody watching the show is going to remember that now forever because it's already an acronym. It plugs into something they already know. It's super easy. Like nobody at nSight doesn't know RSVP. It's everywhere. That's the most distilled. The next level of distillation is R stands for respect and connect. Okay, I kind of know what that means. Like we want to connect and we respect. It's not super deep yet, but it's like it's a little more clear. S stands for servant's heart. Again, I kind of get that there's a service orientation at your company, but it's not super clear yet. P stands for progress over comfort. Again, it's starting to get a little more clear. You're kind of getting, it's like, oh, it's not all about staying in your comfort zone. We're going to try to do maybe some hard things or whatever. And then the V, I should set them out of order. The V stands for value. So that's like a verb. We want people to place value in. It gets clear later. Creating customer value. So those are the 4 elements. So now you've got 2 layers of distillations, but below each one of those things, there are 4 or 5 bullets that are in we believe statements that make them even more clear. So I'll do servant's heart because I think this one is particularly compelling. So servant's heart, the first bullet under there says, we believe that a leader's purpose is to serve their team so that team members can serve the customer and each other. Okay.
Oh, top to bottom.
So now you're starting to get an understanding that servant's heart isn't just about the people who are doing the work to the customer, that it starts at the highest rank with the leader and cascades down. But that bullet has a whole book. The book is called The Motive, and it's by Patrick Lencioni. He's awesome, by the way. If you don't know Pat, he's got about 7 or 8 awesome books. You can read them all. But The Motive is great, and basically what it does is it's a story form, and it explains why the motive of the leader is so important. And it's an illustrative of servant leadership. So if you want to be a leader at nSight, that's part of the canon of literature. So these values, even though they start with a letter S, there's probably about 50 or 60 books that sit below this canon of literature, the Edwards Deming literature, the Toyota way, the lean leadership. There's even things like Carol Dweck's mindset. So in Progress Over Comfort, there's a bullet that says we pay attention to our mindset. And, that's more of the growth mindset, but it's also, we capture that element of the fish. We take joy in doing hard things. So when you actually look at the entirety of the value stack, there's like 20 points and maybe 40 books. And they're round too. They encompass not just some of the behaviors that we need. They encompass all the behaviors we need to go and get our vision. And if they don't, then we can tell. How do we tell? So let's say something's not happening the way we want in our company. We have this analytical tool now with which to say, well, what's going on here? People aren't doing the thing that we think they should do. Is it not covered by our values properly? Or do we have a problem with people embracing and living out the values? And if it's not covered properly by the values, then we can change the values. We can pivot and add or subtract from the values or change the language. Most of the time it's covered in the values, but maybe we just need to do a better job as leaders explaining what those values mean and how they look like in our organization, or point people to the thought leadership that sits beneath the values, like the foundation, the pillars. So, hey, you need to read this book, or you need to read that book, or we need to have this conversation so that you can understand what this really means in practice, and tell some stories about it.
I mean, that's a 5,300 year tradition. And what I mean by that is, I converted to Judaism years and years ago, and one of the things, the basic principles is you're not wrong, right? You can question things, but if you go to the rabbi to say, "Hey, this doesn't make sense. I don't understand this component," they will give you something to read, and then something to talk about, right? So if you distill that down. There was a bumper sticker for Judaism. For Christianity, it would be God said it, I believe it, that's it. And for the Jewish bumper sticker, God said it, I believe it, that's it. Now let's talk about it. And you're really making sure you're teaching people and you're giving them the vehicle to go learn a little bit more and explain it. So yeah, as leaders, we need to make sure they have the tools and the understanding to be able to live that out, but it's our responsibility to give it to them. So you've created essentially a library of ideas that support our SVP, right? It's all there. And you can go back and look at it. Maybe they don't understand this. Maybe they need to look at this book a little further. And now you have something to focus on. And there's accountability. There's all of these elements to that. But it's really about making sure everybody is aligned on what that means. And that if somebody misses it, you're not just throwing a rubber chicken at them. You're actually going back and say, hey, maybe we didn't explain this well, taking that responsibility. Let's talk about this piece of it. Here's something to think a little bit deeper, maybe read this part, right? Or go through it again. Because people need reminding from time to time as well, right? I mean, that happens every day. I love that idea. Because I have a visual in my head of if you literally have like a room, right, with 4 walls with the all of that in a room with the books and it's all written where people can go in and there's the core value room. That's just how my dumb sales brain works. But you have it all there.
Yeah. So, one of the things I think about a lot too, and I'll connect it to what we were talking about here in a second, but it's like, there's an economic, backbone to work and to capitalism and to corporate structures and all this stuff. And people, it is good and it's bad. So, people will show up because they're paid. And a lot of people misread that as, that's what people want from work. And it's like, well, of course they want that. It's not even that they want it. They need it. Like they can't pay their power, or they can't put their kid through college. They can't get food on their table. That people need money. And because they need money, they'll show up to crappy jobs. But they don't want crappy jobs. Actually, they need money, but they want a lot more from work.
Fulfillment.
And one of the other things that they want from work is community. It's like really, really obvious. Like I usually don't have to work too hard to convince other leaders that people want community from work. There's other things that they want from work too, purpose and meaning and all these kind of stuff. But just to say on community, it's like, what's the difference between a team and a collection of individuals, or worse, a collection of factions? And I think the answer to that is something like shared principles, or at the very least, you could say a shared goal. And so I think it's actually important to understand why is that the basis? So the way that we work as human beings is we understand the world in terms of its utility. So we have our goal. That's where we want to go. And we see what things are, and we categorize them as tools and obstacles and friends and foes. So we do this the same. We do it with objects, and we do it with human beings as well. If that person is trying to help me get to where I'm trying to go, they're a friend. If they're in the way from where I'm trying to go, they're a foe. It's like, it's very easy to understand this in sports. Like, I know if I'm the quarterback, the line in front of me, that the offensive line is my friends. The ones who are trying to sack me, they're my foes. Like, because we have totally different competing goals. And so the basis for community, which everybody wants in their job, is shared principles, a shared target, a shared goal, shared behavioral norms that we all have agreed to. So you actually can't get one of the most important things to workers without doing this hard work of having a great culture. Like it's going to erode to, I'll call it the prisoner's dilemma, or just a collection of individuals with competing goals, or everybody is just a stepping stone, an object in their own individual path. Once you have everybody aligned towards a shared vision and a shared behavioral norms, you start approximating, you transform something like fighting to first maybe cooperation and then maybe later collaboration. And you could disagree about a lot, so long as both people are trying to get to the same spot and both people are willing to submit to the uniting principles of the team that they're a part of.
I have an idea that I'm curious your take on family and team. It bothers me and it's a red flag when I'm starting to work with or getting to know a company and they say we're a big family, as opposed to we have a great team and culture. And I think about it this way: when you're in a family, you're not getting out of the family. You're almost stuck, right? We have to navigate all of that craziness that's in a family. There's a level of dysfunction in every family. It's just a function of whether we're throwing rolls at each other at Thanksgiving or if we're on Jerry Springer, doing terrible things. But a team is aligned based on that goal, and everybody wants to get there. So you're selected to be on the team. You have a role on the team, and you contribute to the team to the degree in your role. So that simple concept of it happens in politics, it happens in sports, it happens in corporate America. But how does that fit into that idea of family and team fit into your definition of culture and community?
So you need a hierarchy. Like things are really like people tried this. Like I remember Tony Hsieh tried this like totally flat organization with Zappos, and it was a complete disaster. And everybody else, but he made it sound so palatable. A bunch of other people tried it. It was a complete disaster. So you need hierarchies. Like there's just no way around it. If there were, like we would have sorted it out. We have millennia of hierarchies, and it's across all kinds of different domains, including the corporate domain, the government domain. So you need a hierarchy. What you want is for the hierarchy to be formed on the basis of competence. So the people who are the most competent are high up on the hierarchy, and people who are becoming competent are at the lowest rank, or they're competent at the spot that they are at the hierarchy. You don't want what they call the Peter principle, where people are promoted to the level where they're incompetent, and then they get stuck there. But the other thing you don't want, and everybody already knows this, so I'm going to address your point directly. The other thing you don't want is people who are promoted not because they're competent, but because of their relationship to the person up on the hierarchy, whether that's a nepotistic relationship where it's like it's the child of the person, or whether it's just like that's who I play baseball with on the weekends. You don't want nepotism, or you don't want any decisions of promotion to be made on anything other than who is the most competent to be there. And so what people think, they hear the word family and they think that sounds great, but they don't realize that what's really going on in a corporate structure is you're trying to sort out who's the most competent for the role and where should they sit in this hierarchy, this decision hierarchy. And that's not how a family works at all. Like,
no, it's not.
And we know what governance looks like in kinship. It would be something like the medieval, the medieval kings, dukes, and duchesses. And there's no way anybody could look back and say that's where we should be and we should try to go there. And the fact that we've created this corporate system that really at least rewards those who operate their corporation on competence should be celebrated. We should be trying to revert to something that rewards relationship over competence is my position. So I don't.
Ray Dalio talks about meritocracy, right? The best idea is the competency that all fits into that. It's an ideal, but it's hard to pull off. It's what we're talking about.
I think it's like we're like a big family is one of those things that sounds good because it's not really understood what that means. It means that the relationships are prioritized over execution and competence. And that's actually a really bad place to work for a variety, for everybody in that system. It's not a good place to work. Number one. So I have a take that is adjacent, but I think it'll hit this before. One time I was asked whether it's better to be loved or feared as a leader. Now, I've already gone through the Deming's point on drive fear out of your workplace. So you probably imagine I don't embrace trying to be feared as a leader. But what you might not guess is that I think it's a really bad idea to try to be loved as a leader too. I think both of those are errant goals. And to me, being loved as a leader is something like the familial thing. And why? Well, so if you have a manager who they're really trying to be loved or liked by their team, what they're ultimately doing is, in a very narcissistic way, they're using team members to fill their social demands. They're like the Maslow's hierarchy. It's like social acceptance is up there, and they're, instead of doing what's best for the whole unit and what's best for the company and what's best for the customer, it's a selfish endeavor to be like, I just want to be liked or loved. So I'm going to use my team not to try to get high performance out of them, but to achieve this social acceptance, human need that I have. What a great leader should do is connect with people, like really understand who they are, what they're trying to do. So connection is huge. And
but
Kim
your
Scott,
R, the R in your core values, right? That manager, that leader, like, I don't need to be loved or liked, respected.
I need to provide, right? And that's a bi-directional thing.
It is. You got to be able to earn that. You got to be able to show that. It's something that you just don't get because you're old. In my family, my old man thinks he's deserved respect because he's, the old man. And I'm like, now you got to earn that. And you've done so many things along the way to ratchet that down. It is what it is, right? It's
a two-way street. And that's why you don't want to be loved. You don't want to be feared. You want to be respected, which is a two-way street. So if you are respected, it's going to be because you treat people with respect. And so that's the target. And if you're respected, then you can remain, you can have that human connection, and you can adopt the people who work for you's aim. So you can basically say, hey, you're trying to do this in your career, and I'm going to tell you the uncomfortable things that you need to hear, and you're going to accept them from me, not because I'm not telling you that as a self-serving manipulation. I'm telling that to help you achieve your aim as I understand your aim. And so long as our aims are aligned, we can be part of the same team. When our aims are disaligned, well, I mean, there's not much to do there. Like, you need to go. Like, our corporate aim isn't going to change to accommodate your individual aim that's not in alignment. So, like, if you don't want to help us get to our goal, that's an unresolvable issue. You're not part of the team. You're something else. But you're not a team member.
Selfish. So, takes us. It is. Both parties can be selfish, right? And you can come back and they can be like, you know what, I was wrong. I can't do that, because it's only good for me. It doesn't work with the team. So I need to come back in this direction. I think of it in salespeople, right? We all are selfish as salespeople because we want to win and because we're competitive. But we can win. It's not a zero-sum game, right? I can win and they can win and the whole team can win, and we grow together. But it's given them that grace of having that definition of, like, I'm telling you something that is uncomfortable for you to hear, but I'm doing it for the right reason because you told me you wanted X. And to get that here, you need to behave this way.
There's another common mistake. It's like we have a culture of connection, respect and connect. So managers, by job definition, one of the things that they're asked to do at nSight is to form a real human connection with the people who work for them. Well, we believe that's actually important. Again, I was going to mention this, but this was a principle by Kim Scott in her brilliant book Radical Candor, where she points out that if you manage somebody, if you hold them accountable but don't have a connection, she calls this bucket obnoxious aggression. And then she says the equal and opposite problem, if you love somebody and you have the connection with them, but you don't hold them accountable, it's this ruinous empathy. You're not helping them in that vein. This is kind of back to my point. So we have this culture of connection, but it can make it such that a manager will be like, I really want to give this person a raise. And it's like, why? And it's like, well, because they have kids at home and they're saving for something that's idealistic. It's like, that's not a good reason to give them a raise. All you're going to do at some point is you're going to put them upside down in the value that they're creating. And then you're going to put their whole job at risk. Things get tight. They're going to be the first on the chopping block because they haven't figured out how to create enough value to be worth what you want to pay them. And then they're going to lose their job entirely. So what you need to do is the harder job as the manager, which is you have to show them how to create enough value that they're worth that raise. Because their personal desires on the home front and their financial issues at the home front aren't a reason to pay them more. Or they're a reason, but they're not a sustainable or durable reason. And it won't last, and it won't make for a great company. So the harder job is to be like, you want to make more money? Let me show you how. Here, there are other people who make more money than you, and potentially you could do those things too. Whether it's like here, you could get more technically competent. You could take on more responsibility. I could give you some OT hours, maybe, if that's like, there's other ways to get people more money, but giving them more money because of a personal situation is actually bad for them. And it inhibits their organic growth trajectory, as does keeping somebody who's not good for your team. So this is another kind of adjacent point on the family thing. So like, why is it so bad to treat as a family? Because firing people has to be on the table. It has to be. So let me expand on this point. So I think everybody would agree that work would be better if we thought it was play. These researchers, Doshi and McGregor, figured out that your performance is actually correlated to your motive. And the closer your motive was to the work itself, the better your performance was. So play was the closest. Like if you thought the work was play, you were going to be great at it. The second one was purpose. I really thought the work had really important impact in some meaningful way. And the third was potential. I thought it was going to help me get somewhere. And those were all correlated to positive performance, although play was much higher than the other two. And then the bottom ones, these were associated with negative performance, by the way. Economic pressure, emotional pressure, and inertia. Okay, so now with this frame, imagine you have a non-performing worker. You can almost guarantee that they're not experiencing play in work.
They're not enjoying it, then they don't feel like they have a reason for doing it.
So they're doing it for economic pressure, emotional pressure, inertia. That's why they're struggling with their performance. And they're not leaving because it's difficult to leave. They need to learn something, change something, or take a different job. And that growth inside of them is delayed by exactly the amount of time it takes you to have the accountability conversations and pathways necessary. So you're trapping them in something that's bad for them for a long duration of time if you don't deal with it as a manager. Mm-hmm. The best thing to do is to either improve their performance such that they're motivated by these better, more durable, more productive sources of motive. The work becomes play. They find purpose in it. They find potential in it. Or you have to let them go. That kind of a cold water experience for a lot of people is what's required for them to make the personal growth necessary to win in their life and career. And you're just holding them back.
I had the conversation with my daughter. She's 15, 16 years old. She had her first gig being a hostess. And she's like, I need to make more money. I need to get a different job. I'm like, do you? Do you need to get another job, or can you make more money at that job? And she's like, well, how would I make more money? It's simple. Provide more value. Well, who do I provide more value to? So we talked through it. And instead of just sitting at a hostess stand, looking at her phone, she started paying attention to what was going on in the dining room and helping the servers with the little things that take time that they didn't have time to do. The servers could provide better service because she filled the water, she cleared things, she did all this other little stuff. And what happened? They rewarded her with bigger tip outs, bigger piece of the tips. And they loved working with her, right? She doubled her income just by trying to be more helpful and adding value. And to this day, she'll she'll be 24. She's always looking for a way to make more money, but how do I add more value to the organization? That's still in her brain. So we do that with we need to do that with our children. We need to do that with our employees. And if we don't show them that path and they don't accept it, then you have that other option. It's not easy always to get them to see that, but that's our job as a manager. And I think that's important. And you connected all the dots there. So we share a lot about core value creation and the do's and don'ts with Mike. This episode is what you and the team needs to operationalize the value, this next episode. This means making them known by all, easily hiring fits into your culture, making sure that they're a good fit before you go too far. This is where the rubber meets the road. This episode will be available inside of the Helix community only. The link to the community are in the show notes. The community is free. There's lots of other helpful value added materials in there. There's some other recordings. There's a section in there called videos where you can find all of this third episode plus the parts that I'm calling the final turn, where with some of the guests that I've recorded in the past, I went a little deeper, asked them a few extra questions, and we get a little bit more information. The final turn, just like the final turn in a cigar. So they're all short 3 to 5 minute cuts. So go check it out. Go explore the community. Let me know what you think. Thanks.